The old French house. You know, about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a young man that was walking around looking at everything, and so I introduced myself to him, and he started telling me something that was real, you know, interesting. He said his great great grand uncle built this house. He was from France. His great great grand uncle was an attorney for Napoleon Bonaparte. And when France fell, when Bonaparte fell, his great great uncle went to New Orleans. So he built two houses just alike. This one and one on, I think, Claiborne Street in New Orleans. It's kind of a replica of this house, same floor plan. But anyway, that was quite interesting. But anyway, we acquired the house in 1962 and opened it up as a restaurant in 1964. My mother and my mother's brother, Andrew Satanovich. You know, mother was Croatian, and of course her brother was Croatian as well. Mother could speak Croatian fluently as well. And so we opened the restaurant. We had a Cajun chef. We had an Italian maitre d', Joe Famiglio. Ray Abear was a Cajun chef. And then we also had an African American chef named Elijah Scott. He's the one that did all our gumbo. And then we went to a French house. My dad was Irish. My mother was Croatian. And we had African American waiters. You know, so like my mother said, we were a real international house back then. Yeah. Well, of course, my mother and Dr. Ben O'Keefe kind of started the Hibernia Society. You know, I would say probably back in maybe the early '70s. You know, and they got a Hibernia Society where they had a big parade and so on and so big celebration for St. Patrick's Day. Everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day. We have a St. Patrick's Day parade here in town, and they have a lace skirting luncheon and ordered a Blondie luncheon here, a couple weeks before St. Patrick's Day, and they get together. And then they have the big parade on where they have a Colleen and where they have a Grand Marshal. My father was Irish, and he came here in '42, I think, at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, and we didn't have, I think, a big influx of Irish people like we did with the French and the Croatians. To my knowledge, I don't think we had a big influx of we had the O'Keefes here, and I think they opened their funeral home back in middle 1800s, I think, or late 1800s, something like that. My grandfather, he was Croatian. He came here about in the late 1880s. As a young man, maybe in 1895, something like that. My grandmother didn't get here till 1922, and my grandfather didn't know my grandmother, but my grandfather saw my grandmother doing something, and he said, "She's got to be a good girl." You'll never guess what she was doing. She was walking to and from the factories, getting on work, and he saw her walking. He see her walking every day, and she would do something every day. Say, "Oh boy, that's got to be a good girl." She was saying the rosary. So characters doing the right thing when nobody's looking. So she was praying to and from work. You know what I mean? And so he started, I guess, courting her, and of course they got married. They got married in '23. My mother was born in '24. And my aunt and uncle were Irish twins. You know what Irish twins are?
No.
My aunt was born in January, my uncle was born in December of the same year. That's Irish twins. Okay? Well, back then, it was unheard of for a Croatian guy to be fooling around with a French woman or vice versa, because basically all the Croatians were on Point Cadet and all the French people probably were on Back Bay. the Back Bay. And so I remember Dennis D'Ortez and Sistra D'Ortez. She was a Patalo. He was a Frenchman, you know what I mean? And I remember them telling me that they had to sneak around because it wasn't copacetic for a Croatian to go out with a French girl. And not even the French club, the French people have a French club on the Point. When we voted for gambling in Harrison County, well, Biloxi voted for almost 70%. D'Iberville was about the same thing. Gulfport voted against it 45-55. Long Beach was way worse, 35-65. Pasch Christian, 50-50. Why do you think Biloxi voted for gambling by 70%? Gulfport voted against it 45-55. You know why? There's something big in Biloxi that Gulfport don't have. We have 7 of them in Biloxi. They have 2 of them in Gulfport. And you know what they are? Catholic churches. So when you told a Catholic about gambling, he didn't say, "Oh no," he said, "Where at?" Because I want to say every Catholic parish here in Biloxi had a bazaar. Yeah. You know what I mean? You know what a bazaar is? That's when they had corny games, and they throw the rings on the hoops, and they spun the wheel with the cake running around. They shot dice and played over under 7. You could bet over 7, under 7. If they threw 7, both sides lost. And that's with the French and the Croatian and the Irish. All of them are very Catholic, French, Croatian, and Irish. You know what I mean? So, and that's a heritage. And so we got the Fisherman's Church down there, St. Michael's Church. Got oyster shell on top. And Father Mullen was my mother's mentor all through her life. At 14 years old, Mother found the smartest guy in town, and that was Father Mullen. He was a parish priest, graduated from Oxford University in England. And so he used to help my mother with the homework. One time he came back here about 1983, and Robert McHugh at the Sun Herald interviewed him. He said, I used to help Mary with her homework a lot, but sometimes it was a bit of an ordeal. She was probably the only person I knew who could use a triple negative and still make sense. He says, so if you have children like her, not to despair, they can grow up and be as successful as Mary Mahoney.